Immediate stop to arms supplies to a supposed ally at war begs one simple question.
Sir, is this move punishment for Zelenskyy or strategy for Ukraine?
Comment on Ukraine?
It wasn't just the Americans sending a message to Ukraine last night. As President Trump declared a pause on the supply of weapons for Ukraine, Russia unleashed a new barrage on them. Drone attacks on the cities of Odessa and Sumy. While tying one hand behind Ukraine's back, today the US said there is a way to move forward, but on their terms.
The president is still committed to the mineral deal. I think we've heard some positive things, but not yet, of course, a signature from our friends in Ukraine. But look, the mineral deal is a really important part of the president's policy. Number one, the American people have got to get some payback for the incredible financial investment we've made in this country.
The response from Ukraine's President Zelenskyy today, immediate. Our meeting in Washington at the White House on Friday did not go the way it was supposed to be. It is regrettable that it happened this way. It is time to make things right. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time and in any convenient format. The acquiescence of a premier whose hand has been forced.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people.
72 hours after this meeting in the Oval Office, all arms, even ones previously agreed but not yet in Ukraine, have been suspended. Etched on the ground of Kyiv, praise for a weapon system for which Ukraine is dependent on the US.
Patriot Systems is the only system that is capable of repelling Russian ballistic missile strikes. We count on US support because it has been significant, including intelligence exchange and air defense, the protection of our skies, cities, civil infrastructure, Ukrainian civilians. This is United States' contribution. It has saved thousands, maybe tens of thousands of Ukrainian lives.
Are you comfortable with the suspension of arms to Ukraine?
Zelenskyy missed a very important moment. He needed to walk in and sign the deal on Friday. So that's a very unfortunate mistake on Mr. Zelensky's part.
But are you punishing? The people of Ukraine now for annoyance with President Zelenskyy?
It's not annoyance with President Zelenskyy. It's that he needs to sign the critical minerals deal that was agreed to, and he changed his mind.
We want peace. So I know I know President Trump. That's what he wants, and so we just got to work this through.
But by suspending weapons, it may give Russia, in the immediate term, the upper hand. It may mean that they can win towns that they may not have.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen.
But it may happen.
I hope that doesn't happen.
I think this will go down in history as the most catastrophic Oval Office meeting ever, and I think that's unfortunate.
But isn't there more to this than just how one man performed in the Oval Office?
I think President Zelenskyy came to Washington with an intention of attacking and insulting President Trump. I think that was really foolish. It's also clear President Trump campaigned in November on ending the war in Ukraine. The war is going to end. What I have urged President Trump, I think it's important that it end in a way that is a clear and unmistakable loss for Russia.
In the meantime, though, with the suspension of weapons, this may end up putting Russia in a very strong position to claim towns that they would not have otherwise. Are you comfortable with that?
So let me ask, where are you from?
We're from the UK.
You're from the UK. Well, this is a great opportunity for Europe to step up and provide funding.
For Democrats, the move may be abhorrent to them, but in the minority, they're in possession of more anger than influence.
It suggests an erratic and self-indulgent approach by the president to national security policymaking with potentially grave implications for the transatlantic alliance and for America's national security.
Yesterday, President Trump's team said time was running out for a deal to be made. Today, the screws have been tightened. It's now ammunition and the ability to fight this war that could soon be running dry too.
We're expecting to hear more from President Trump and his plans for Ukraine later on when he addresses
Congress in what's not a State of the Union but will look an awful lot like a State of the Union. But what's been striking here today is the hold that President Trump has over the Republican Party. There have been very few dissenting voices. None of those voices who would normally speak out against President Trump stopped and spoke to us today. In fact, one came around a corridor to a select committee, saw the bank of reporters in front of him and quite literally ducked into a side room so he did not have to speak to us. Because here, this is now the age of strong man politics. And President Trump doesn't just have the strong arm over Ukraine, he has it over the Republican Party too.
In DC for us tonight. Now, the EU says it is ready to step up with an €800 billion plan to rearm Europe and provide urgent military support for Ukraine. America's withdrawal of its military aid came as a shock to Europe's leaders, and tense relations across the Atlantic were not improved when Vice President Vance appeared to denigrate European armies, which he claimed haven't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. Our political editor Gary Gibbon has more.
A glossy video issued by Number 10 celebrating last week's White House meeting. But that doesn't seem to have kept Keir Starmer looped in.
It's my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King.
A few hours before President Trump announced he was freezing military help for Ukraine, Keir Starmer had no idea about it.
I haven't seen reports of the US withdrawing support for Ukraine, and as I understand, that is not their position.
Soon after that, Keir Starmer called President Trump to try to dissuade him, but it didn't do any good. Please fasten your seatbelts, we're moving into turbulence. The Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, like other European leaders, ambushed by the White House announcement. He said from what he could gather from the border base Yashonka, that is the hub for shipments to Ukraine, the US suspension appeared to be real and immediate.
The message from the White House is this is an attempt to force Ukraine to get to the negotiating table and accept a deal. The problem is this question is not being asked of Russia.
We're living in the most momentous and dangerous of times. We are in an era of rearmament. And Europe is ready to massively boost its defence spending.
The European Commission President was announcing loosened borrowing rules to boost European defence spending. Many European governments now worry the next big surprise from Washington could be the easing of sanctions against Russia.
Could there come a point where the conflict continues and Europe and America are on different sides?
I think that's entirely possible. I think the moment of truth may well come if, as President Trump is saying, the United States and Russia come to a deal on the future of Ukraine without Ukraine sign-off, without Europe sign-off.
Okay, let's go.
The leaders Keir Starmer convened on Sunday are still desperately trying to keep some sort of common Western approach, not helped by a new US administration in constant broadcast mode. The Vice President's interview last night seen by some as a slur on the British and French military.
That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years.
The Shadow Defence Secretary said thousands of British and French personnel went to Afghanistan, and it's deeply disrespectful to ignore such service and sacrifice. His party leader suggested he and others pipe down.
I know J.D. Vance quite well. I've looked at the comments. I don't think he actually said that. I think a lot of people are getting carried away. They're saying loads of things and getting quite animated. Let's keep cool heads.
President Zelenskyy was strongly counselled by Keir Starmer to write the conciliatory words he tweeted tonight, hoping, amongst other things, that NATO leaders don't have too many more meetings like this one, without the United States in the room, working to different agendas.
I'm certain that the Trump administration wants to deliver on two things. That's certainly what President Trump promised during his campaign, which is first, put an end to the killing, find peace, and second is have Europe pay more for its own defense. So far, so good. I think those goals are perfect. We agree with those. The only thing is that Russia seems not to agree with the first one, and the second thing, ramping up European defense and deterrence, doesn't happen overnight, and we have already started working on it. It's not like European countries would have just stood still.
But let's be honest, the reason why there is a degree of alarm, if not panic, in European capitals is not so much because of the growing threat from Russia. It's because America is no longer providing the kind of protections that we had taken for granted. And on the peace front, everyone wants peace, but not at any price.
It's exactly as you're saying, and I guess also in America, people know that it's been in America's interest to have a significant presence in Europe, also militarily, and that certainly was the arrangement and the agreement after the world wars. And we have been, both sides, benefiting significantly from the peace dividend, so to say.
Is that over now, that peace dividend?
Well, I'm sure it's not over, because this also has an economic price tag. Like we see now already, the stock market doesn't really appreciate this volatility.
Given everything that the Trump administration has done and said in recent weeks about the war in Ukraine, can you really be certain that the Trump administration is still on the side of Ukraine?
Our message to the Americans is that if we want to have peace, and everybody wants to have peace except for Russia apparently, the pressure should be on Russia. And we should do this together. And I'm so certain that America will realize this at some point, and certainly the American people will do that.
How alarmed are you by the fact that the Trump administration overnight has frozen military aid to Ukraine?
I think it's not good news, and I'm hoping, and certainly our messages to Washington are that let's do this together, let's continue doing it together, and certainly Europe has been picking up the bill, the majority of the bill so far as well.
On that note, do you think that Europe can and should deploy troops on the ground without the American security umbrella?
We are at very early stages of planning security arrangements for Ukraine if there was a ceasefire or a process towards peace. And this is certainly what we hope.
But if the Americans say, no, we're not part of it, we don't want anything to do with this is over to you, Europe, is it still a good idea for us to go ahead with it?
If we want to have credible security arrangements, I think NATO membership for Ukraine should not be off the table, but whether Ukraine is in NATO now, in the future, or not at all, the most significant burden of the deterrence, of course, lies with Ukrainian troops.
Do you think that President Zelenskyy should just sign the deal, the American deal, as is, on the table?
I'm sure that if there was an agreement, a fair agreement, on not just the use of those minerals, but really, making investments into the use of the minerals, then it could benefit both sides.
Just finally, you've been very clear about assets, frozen Russian assets to be used. Do you think that all of Europe should now be behind the idea that you have hundreds of billions of US dollars worth of frozen assets that should now be used for the war effort?
It's so important that we concentrate less on how we finance things, but that we really ramp up our own defense and also, help Ukraine and continue with the economic pressure against Russia. And we will figure it out.
Foreign Minister Valtonen, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Now to the other war. The prospect of an all-out global trade war has moved a step closer, sending stock markets around the world tumbling. First, President Trump slapped tariffs on imports from America's three largest trading partners. That's 25% for Mexico and Canada, and a doubling of previous tariffs on China to 20%. Within hours, China and Canada had retaliated. But Justin Trudeau's vow not to back down may have earned his country even higher tariffs. Well, let's get more of that from our economics reporter, Neil MacDonald. So what has the president announced?
Well, it's the end of 80 years of US trade policy, effectively. I mean, these tariffs are going to affect a lot of things that US consumers and industry currently buy. I mean, let's take a look at it. Canada exports over $400 billion of goods to the United States, China 439, Mexico over $500 billion. All of this could face tariffs. The US says the reason is they haven't done enough to control the flow of fentanyl into their country. How big a shift is this? I mean, let me show you a graph produced by the consultancy Capital Economics. They show the effective tariff rate the USA has been imposing on the rest of the world over years and years and years. You can see it's declined pretty consistently, actually, since the 1930s. Under Trump, this is where they think that level now is, at a level not seen since World War II. They say this is at a stroke, undoing all of post-war globalization.
And the impact on the US economy?
Well, the stock market doesn't like the look of it. I mean, the Dow Jones fell 800 points at first. I mean, that is significant because when Trump was elected, of course, the stock markets all shot up, and a lot of that enthusiasm seems to have evaporated. That is because most economists think that tariffs mean more inflation. The administration denies that. How much will it go up? It depends on how far the importers of all these goods think they can pass on those tariffs to consumers. The problem in the United States is that inflation is already actually trending higher. You can see here how, in the chart, inflation hit a trough back in September. It's gone up every month for the subsequent 4 months. Now, this is not the sort of peaks we saw under President Biden,
but he did promise to lower inflation, didn't he, Trump?
Correct. And US consumers think it's going higher, possibly 6% on one survey, and that is really undermining US consumer confidence.
And what about US producers?
Well, any company that's bringing components in from Mexico, Canada, or China has got a big problem. Your car makers today said that this will raise the cost of building vehicles in the USA. Other producers have a different problem, which is the retaliatory tariffs they may face on their exports. So China has said it's going to impose tariffs of 10 or 15% on soybeans, corn, chicken, wheat, a whole raft of farm products. And that is because China is the largest market for American farmers. And I just want to show you this map of, for example, soybean farmers, where they are based in the United States.
Lots of Republican states.
You've got it, Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, all the way down through the country. China perhaps knows exactly where to apply the pressure. And Matt, this is not the end of it. President Trump is promising more tariffs next month, and those are the ones that could directly affect the UK.
Can't wait. Neil MacDonald, thank you very much indeed.